TCU opens the season against Colorado this year. It's going to be a very hyped game. I expect big noon kickoff. Maybe College Game Day will even be there for the kickoff of the Coach Prime era. But the Frogs should not be afraid of the Buffaloes. Like there's this growing sentiment that this might be an upset. Listen, that's not happening. The game's not going to be close. I'll tell you why next on Lockdown Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Locked On Horned Frogs. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. One of our listeners, watchers, realized yesterday that we hit our goal of 600 subscribers, which is true. I appreciate you doing that. That was Craig that pointed that out. Thank you, Craig. We're at 607 now. Let's just keep it going. Excited that you guys are enjoying the content on YouTube, or if you're enjoying it in its audio form, you can always subscribe via any audio platform that you listen to. We're now on the SiriusXM app as well. If you have that and would like to check it out on SiriusXM, you can listen to Locked On Horned Frogs there as well. So TCU opens the season against Colorado this year. And they did this last year in Boulder, won that game 38-13, dominated the second half, really dominated physically on the ground, did not play super well in the first half. That was a 7-6 ball game at halftime, and TCU's only touchdown came via a Darius Davis punt return. And so I've been kind of watching the narrative around this. And Colorado is doing something really interesting. I mean, everybody kind of does this now when they bring in a new coach. They do an overhaul of transfers. But Deion Sanders, at the moment, and this changes constantly, so it might be different by the time I record, but according to The Athletic, he has 42 transfers coming in, 21 that came in and went through spring practice, and then I believe 21 more who are verbally committed to come play for Boulder, to come play for Coach Prime in Boulder. And Deion Sanders has been very vocal. You know, he had that famous video where he told the guys that were there, he was like, "Listen, I'm bringing luggage, and it's Louis. Go ahead and hit the portal." And he basically cut a lot of players in the offseason. And that in itself is not necessarily unprecedented. Like, we see coaches now do huge roster overhauls in the offseason. Lincoln Riley did this at USC, but Deion's taking it to another level. And I think the combination of a relatively close game in the first half last year when Colorado was one of the worst teams in Power 5 football, combined with all the hype of Deion Sanders coming in as the head coach, a lot of talent that's coming to Colorado now, and what's going to be a much more talented team when TCU and Colorado face off, there's a belief, not really in the betting market. I'll share some of the betting lines a little bit later, but I've just kind of seen this online. There's a belief that this game might be close, or from Colorado fans, really the only people I've seen say this, that the Buffaloes might win, which is absurd and ridiculous. TCU is coming off a national championship appearance season, right? Like, went 12-0 in the regular season. Unfortunately, lost that Big 12 championship game to Kansas State. Yes, they have a lot of overhaul. They lost Max Duggan. They lost Quentin Johnson, Kendra Miller. They had 8 players drafted. We know the drill. However, this season opener is not going to be close. TCU is going to win this game by a big margin. Colorado, I think, is going to be good eventually. I think this experiment's going to work. Deion brings in talent, and talent is not everything, but it is a huge factor in college football. As much as we love to just think that it's like the movie Rudy and anybody can be anything, and if you just work really hard, you can beat anyone. In a lot of instances, talent wins out. Like, it has to be that combination of talent and great culture and hard work, and all those things need to come together. And so I don't doubt that Deion is going to bring in some great players. He already has. However, this is a massive roster overhaul. And TCU is getting Colorado in the very first game of the season. And there's a lot of guys that, even though they're super talented, Travis Hunter was the number 1 player in the country coming out of high school. Deion got him to go to Jackson State. And he will be on the other side in this game when TCU plays Colorado as a corner, possibly a wide receiver. He plays both ways. Shadur Sanders, very talented quarterback, but it's going to be his first time playing like real Power 5 football. They've completely overhauled this offense and defensive line. They have a brand new receiving core. And yes, Colorado is going to be better. They're going to be much more athletic. But TCU is not going to be intimidated. They played the best of the best last year. And aside from just an awful game in the national title against Georgia, they took everybody's best shot and they won those games. I mean, like they have brought in some really talented wide receivers. We might see Travis Hunter on offense, right? Like we might see him catching passes. They brought in some guys like, Jalen Ellis from Baylor, who we're familiar with, Willie Gaines from Jackson State, who had a huge year, Jimmy Horn Jr. from UCF, who had over 800 yards, or excuse me, 551 yards last season. EJ Horton from Marshall, who's a young player they like. Xavier Weaver from South Florida, who's a talented player who had 718 yards receiving last year. But, I mean, do you think guys like Avery Helm, who started at corner in the SEC and played there all season last year, and Josh Newton on the other side, who started in the Big 12 and played a lot of great wide receivers, are going to be intimidated by that athleticism talent? No. Do you think in the trenches, guys like Dominic Williams and Timon Mitchell, who's played at Georgia, is now at TCU, and Caleb Fox, who played at a high level all year last year and played high-level talent in the trenches all year long, are going to be intimidated by the three-star players that they brought in? Like, Colorado's overhauling this offense and defensive line. They're doing it on the offensive line with a lot of Kent State transfers, which, I mean, they're good players. Sean Lewis, the Kent State head coach, is coming over to be their offensive coordinator. Really sharp mind. But this is game one with a brand new team, basically like an expansion football team. And I think TCU is going to take this game seriously. There's going to be a lot of hype around it. This crew has something to prove. They got embarrassed in the last game of the season last year. Sonny Dykes is going to have them ready. It's going to be a tough preparation because, this is a talented team and you don't know a lot about them. You don't know what they're going to do. And there's good players like Derek McClendon from Florida State, who started every game at the edge for Florida State last year. He's on their defensive line. It's going to be a good test for Brandon Coleman and Andrew Coker. But again, these are guys that face off against some of the best talent in the country last year. Like those two tackles started every game last season. Colorado's going to be better. But this season opener is not going to be close. TCU has brought in their own talent, right? JoJo Earl from Alabama, the slot receiver position. John Paul Richardson from Oklahoma State, the slot receiver position. They have guys like Savion Williams, who's really experienced on the outside. I mentioned the players in the secondary. They're going to be ready for this game. They'll be prepared, and they're going to win. Our friends at FanDuel have the line at 23.5, which is high. And I saw most, these lines opened for the most part. TCU was 18-point favorites. So essentially like a 3-touchdown favorite. And it's actually moved more towards TCU with all this transferring in and out. Because Colorado at the moment doesn't have a lot of scholarship players. Now that's going to change because they'll get these guys verbally committed, signed, and they'll be okay. Like from a scholarship standpoint, they'll be fine. But this is a brand new coaching staff, brand new team, and TCU dominated that game physically last year. Like, yes, they struggled in the first half. Chandler Morris and that offense didn't do a great job, but they ran for 275 yards. Max Duggan came in like midway through the third quarter and only threw the ball 3 times because they just figured out like we can just run the football on Colorado and it's not going to be a big deal. And I think Colorado's going to be much better in the trenches this year, but I still feel like TCU's physicality is going to win out. TCU wins. TCU covers. Yes, they're going to cover the 23.5. And listen, before everybody jumps all over me, I think this experiment at Colorado is going to work. I think Deion Sanders is going to bring in talent. I feel like this coaching staff around him is really good, and they will eventually be a good football team. But you're coming off a 1-11 season. You have a brand new roster. I think 6-6 would be like a great year. And I think that's if some things fall into place for them. I don't feel like that's where they're going. I think we're looking at more like 3 or 4 wins for the Buffaloes, even with all this talent they brought in. Because it's just hard to flip a roster like this. We've never seen anybody do it. But TCU's winning this game, and they're winning handedly. Thanks to our friends at FanDuel who gave us that line. And I wanted to talk about FanDuel before we move on here. FanDuel's where the game starts. They're the official betting partner of the NBA. Don't know if you watched Warriors-Lakers last night, but Lakers go up 3-1 in that series. We got Celtics and Sixers tonight in a series that's tied at 2. And with these NBA playoff games, you can bet money line, you can make prop bets, do parlays, whatever it is you want to get involved in. You can do that at FanDuel. They have an app that's safe, secure, and easy to use. You can also go to fanduel.com/lockedon. Again, that's fanduel.com/lockedon to take advantage of their no sweat first bet deal. Again, that's a no sweat first bet deal. Put as little as $5 down on your first bet and get to $1,000 possibly in bonus bets. FanDuel, again, it's where the game starts. Okay, back here on Locked On Horned Frogs, I wanted to share some of your comments from yesterday's episode. I talked about TCU's offense and could it possibly be better in 2024. Garrett Riley moves on. Kendall Browse coming in as play caller. A lot of changeover in personnel. Chandler Morris at quarterback. Obviously, Quentin Johnston's gone. Kendra Miller's gone. We talked about this in the last segment. Amari DiMercato also will be out, which I think is probably a bigger deal than sometimes we want to make it to be because he was such a good backup running back. But some of you commented on YouTube and had some thoughts. Justin McGuffey said last year the athletic talent of Duggan, Miller, and Johnston bailed out the play calling with big plays over 25-plus yards. If Morris can sustain drives and dominate the time of possession, it will score less points, but be much better. Yeah, I agree with some of that. I don't agree that Garrett Riley was a horrible play caller. I think he wasn't always a great situational play caller, but I feel like the way he scripted games and the way he went about calling games was good and smart. And yes, they definitely had moments where it was like, screw it, QJ's down there somewhere and let's loft it up. But I think the flip side of that is they had this athletic talent on the roster for at least 2 seasons before Garrett Riley and Sonny Dykes got there, and they weren't able to score points consistently. Like, they definitely upgraded from what they were doing. So if it was just Kendre and Quentin and Max bailing out bad play calling, why didn't they do that the first couple of years of their career? Like, what was the difference? I think there was obviously a more coherent and cohesive offensive game plan that contributed to some of that. But yeah, they, the offense at times was a big play offense. I think it was kind of boom or bust, and I feel like they could definitely be more efficient in 2024 or 2023, excuse me. So I agree with you on that. Tommy Fisher, he said about the offense, I do think the offense could be better. I think the passing game will be better. Run game might take a hit. One thing to keep in mind is the new rules with the running clock to shorten the game. There might not be as many possessions. If that's the case, scoring will be down for everybody. That's a good point about the clock. I feel like everybody kind of just said, oh, yeah, they're not stopping the clock anymore after first downs, except in the last 2 minutes. Not a huge deal, and kind of moved on. But to me, that's a huge deal. I mean, obviously in the NFL, scoring still happens a lot. You still have comebacks. But, I mean, that's one reason why in college football, teams are always able to stay in games. And the game's never really truly over until it is, because these comebacks can happen because the clock stops so frequently and you can move the ball without having to burn your timeouts. And so I do think that's a big deal. And yes, that might affect possessions. That might affect scoring in general. You're right about that. Biff McGraw. Hey, Biff, haven't heard from you before. Good to see you. If Chandler Morris plays like he did against Baylor, I think they can be better. It was the Kendall Browse offense that prevented TCU from going to the playoffs in 2014. He also has experience in the SEC. Yeah, Kendall did a really nice job calling plays for Arkansas in the SEC West, which I think is the best division in football. And so you're right about that. And I could see this offense being better, maybe even being, not more explosive, but more efficient, as we've talked about. And yeah, that those Baylor teams in 2014, 2015 were really, really good, and they could score with anybody. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how he's evolved since then. CJ said, I love Chandler and all the pass catching weapons, He's most worried about the running back room. The running backs, I said this after the spring game, they didn't overly impress me. I think in the end they'll be okay. But Kendre Miller's a big loss. I like Trey Sanders. I like the patience I saw from him. Obviously, there's questions about his durability and health because he was out for so long during Alabama at his time in Alabama after that car accident. And then we'll kind of just have to see with Imani Bailey. But they might not have one bell cow back like they did last year, but I feel like they could have, a good tandem or a good committee that could have good production. And Zoom Play said, yes, this offense is faster and more explosive. Definitely will be faster. I think to be determined about the explosiveness, but they want to play at a fast pace for sure. Thank you so much for chiming in. You can always do that in the YouTube comments. You can also tweet at me. I'm at SimcockSteven on Twitter, and the show is at Locked On TCU. We'll take another break and then wrap things up. This is Locked On Horned Frogs. Thanks for joining us today. Reminder, no midweek game for TCU baseball. So they will get back in action on Friday against Baylor. A couple kind of housekeeping things about some other spring sports. TCU Beach Volleyball, congrats to them on a great season. They made it to the Final Four, but fell to USC in the national semifinals by a score of 3-2. They won 2 matches but lost 3. That final match went to the last set. USC went on to win the national championship. But great season overall at TCU Beach Volleyball. Wish they could have brought home a national title, but they're building something special over there. They're getting better and better each and every year. And TCU men's tennis, they won their regional. They swept UTA and then swept Texas A&M. Luke Famba did not play in either of those matches, so that's something to watch. Not sure if he's nursing an injury or what, but they'll get underway in the Super Regionals against Mississippi State this weekend. Again, those matches will be in Fort Worth. So that'll be fun to watch. TCU men's tennis trying to go for a national title. A lot of good sports this year at TCU, as we all know. That'll do it for Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team every day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody.